Good evening. My name is AJ LaRosa. I'm the chair of the Development Review Board, and I'm going to call today the June 3rd, 2025 meeting to order. We will go through the agenda in the order in which they are listed. The first item I have on our agenda is 24 Grant Street, and that is ZP 2592. A request for post-fire rehabilitation to add, I should probably check that up. Sorry. Post-fire renovation include the addition of one residential dwelling unit for a total of 6 in the principal structure. We have Doug on behalf of the applicant here today. Are there any other people here to speak on this application? All right, this has been listed on our consent agenda item. Anybody have any issue with treating it as a consent agenda item? Nope. All right, then I move that we approve ZP 25. Do you have any questions about that?
That do not.
That we approve. Anybody online? Anybody?
Nobody online for this item.
I move that we approve ZP 2592.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Grant Street's done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening. 9 minutes to go.
Not the only one. So the next item on our agenda was 134 Archibald. So proposed appeal of administrative denial of ZP 2594 to convert existing building from commercial occupancy to mixed use commercial residential occupancy. Is there anyone here for this item? Anyone online?
No.
Okay, so I am informed that the appeal was withdrawn today by the applicant, and so we will not hear that item. There's nothing to hear. All right, moving on. 120 Depot Street. This is a request by Steve and Andrea Trombley for a variance to allow for an exception to the existing height regulations. And this is not an appeal of a variance denial, but an original request for a variance, right? Do I have that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Is the applicant here? Come on up. Can I get you, anyone else interested in speaking on this application to raise their right hands? Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true and correct, with the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Correct. Are you Steve?
I am.
Steve, why don't you explain to us why you should be given a variance for this?
The site that we're looking at building on is extremely steep for them, and the slope comes almost up to the edge of the property on the side that faces Depot Street, which is the only access to the property. So at the moment, there isn't really any way to accommodate that steep slope in the ordinance as it stands. It requires a 50-foot setback in order to be able to do something that allows the height to be measured around the perimeter as opposed to just off the Depot Street. If you measure just off from the Depot Street, it essentially means that the majority of the house has to be built into the slope, as in, mostly underground, if you would. So reducing that 50-foot setback allows us to build something mostly above ground that will still be able to use the perimeter measurement, which allows us to still accommodate the 55-foot height requirement, but allows us to do it closer to the street so that it doesn't have to be below ground.
So the site we're very familiar with, we've seen this a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask a question of staff first. So Scott, I don't remember, I should. The approval of the 10-foot yard setback variance. Can you remind us what we approved there?
Sure.
Other than what's on, I mean, like, apparently we approved,
So the neighboring properties are through lots with frontages on North Avenue. The punchline is that the front yard setback on this property, Mr. Trombley, is basically beyond his rear property line.
right,
So
because
he would
the
approve for a front yard setback variance of 10 feet.
and that is from Depot Street back.
Correct.
And the building height in this district, if it is within 50 feet of the front,
Yes,
is 55 feet.
no, you mentioned 55 feet. The height limit is 35 feet.
Got it.
There's two ways to measure height in the ordinance. And one way, the applicable way in this instance, is to measure just the front. And that's for buildings within 50 feet of the front property line.
Got it.
That has problems here, hence the variance request to use the other metric, which is allowed for buildings further than 50 feet from the front line. What that does is you measure the building height all the way around the building from the average finish grade. But the height limit is 35 feet.
Scott, am I right in that this alternative method was in fact for a property like this, it's built on a very steep slope with a huge difference between the front and set? This.
I would say it was for that, it's just that if a building is more than 50 feet away, its relationship to the streetscape is less significant than otherwise. But it does have that I'll say added applicability in this case, as I pointed out, like. The inverse is true, like along South William Street. Right, where the condos out the backside of those historic buildings grow taller as it goes down the hill. That doesn't work when the hill goes up in the front line, right?
The hill went the other way, like if you were building it this way,
Yeah.
the back of it, the Depot Street side could be
Correct.
60 feet.
Yeah.
And let me help us understand. Have you looked at all the designs for the house? And how much would be underground or low grade or like, what's the actual material constructed difference? And how high up do you want to go? What's the actual material difference in calculating height under 1B versus calculating it under 1A?
Yes, I actually don't think I uploaded that sketch, but it essentially was between 72 and 80% of it was underground when trying to meet the 35-foot based on just the front measurement.
That's what this sketch is.
Yeah.
That's because it's such a steep slope that you're actually going in as far as.
Right.
So
Yes. Yeah.
Which then has slope stabilization issues as well, as you're excavating.
Yes, yeah, and that's part of what the engineering has involved is what's required to do that.
I have I guess another question. Do you have an approved curb cut from Depot Street? There's no question that that is the front.
Yes, that's the only access on that side.
I guess I have a question for staff, because we had some sort of height variance before us for this same property.
Yep.
In your view, what is the difference that has given you the recommendation to approve?
He's asking a different question. The prior variance was a straight up, I think it was like 60 or 65 foot height variance. This is a different question, not looking to just throw height limits out the window, it's to use this different methodology. Using that different methodology, it has to comply with the height limit. So the question is different.
Okay, thank you.
But aren't they both variances? And why did we deny the last variance?
To paraphrase, going in excess of 60 feet seemed to be pretty excessive beyond the 35 foot standard.
Do you know if measuring the way we're being asked to measure now would result in a house that is the same height as the 60-foot variance height request we rejected?
If this variance was allowed, uh, it could go as high as that. My expectation is that I'll be bringing something before you that is lower than that, because that I'm trying to be as forthcoming as I can as far as compromising on something that would be, more acceptable to the board, because ultimately they're the ones that get to say yay or nay, I suppose. So
Well, and that would be like 55 feet from, what is it, version A of measuring, but if we're under version B, it wouldn't technically be that height.
I don't know, it's a short answer. But it would need to comply with 35 feet as measured all the way around. I don't know if the prior design complied or not.
Is it physically possible to build something on this site without the variance?
only if you're willing to live underground.
You can't build. Oh. Yeah. Do a cut and fill and then build on.
I don't know.
That's just.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would work, because you already are your entrance into the property for Depot Street already has an incline to it. If we were to build up higher to accomplish that, you wouldn't be able to get into the property, I guess. There wouldn't be any access to it.
I have another question. Will you be able to see this house from Battery Street? Is there an avenue where you can look and see that from Battery?
No, I don't believe there's any way to do that, no. No, it's essentially behind the police station and the condo association.
This question. If you could see the house from Battery, would it be no larger than the existing facade along Battery Street?
I don't think it'd be possible in any way, shape, or form to see it from Battery Street. Possibly from North Avenue.
You could like drive off Battery Street onto the house.
I mean, I can see the height restriction being enforced if it was gonna be higher than the surrounding facade. The idea is the height restriction limits an outlier. You can't see this from Battery, it's not an outlier. You can only see it from Depot. It would seem reasonable to have this kind of calculation for a height.
From North Street, it would look like a ranch house would be.
It'd be at most.
Yeah,
Shorter than.
Yeah.
Yeah, at most you'd see one story from North Avenue if you
I
look
meant
across.
North Battery, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm in the same Battery, North Avenue. Yes.
Can you tell me how zero was established? So I understand it's 34.2 high, but how is the zero one?
that is the location where the average between the high points and the low points is. That's where the average height is based on the perimeter measurements of the property. That's where you measure, would essentially come up with that dimension.
And you obviously can't enter it off of North Ave.
No, if I were able to do that, we wouldn't be sitting here, because
Right.
I would be able to use
You would just use that as the front address.
right.
Because like, obviously, we've all seen houses sort of built this way on the slopes, just in reverse. direction.
Yes, yeah,
Like the condos that are built
precisely.
up the hill.
Yeah,
Did those condos, the redstone condos?
No, they didn't need it because they're accessed off the front side.
All
Right,
right.
because you can just measure height that way.
All right.
yeah.
Why can't this be accessed from North Ave?
And I have no access or right of way from
Lot
there.
doesn't go to.
Oh,
Right,
landlocked.
yeah. Unfortunately. Unless, of course, the folks at the condo association felt like giving me a right of way there, right?
Yes. Any other questions from the board? You had your hand up, ma'am?
I did. We also have a lawyer attending via Zoom.
Okay, that's great. Do you want them to speak?
Yes, I would.
All right. You just identify yourself quickly.
My name is Elizabeth Christie, 33 North Avenue, apartment 3.
Okay. Whoever Miss Christie's lawyer is.
The attorney, how to see online.
Oh,
Hi, can you hear me?
wait. Hans, then.
Yes, AJ, I tried to flag this earlier for you so you could recuse yourself. I'm sorry.
I'm recused, apologize.
Okay, I will take over the meeting. You are welcome to share your thoughts on behalf of the condo owners.
Thank you. My name is Hans Husey, and I'm here on behalf of the Commodore Point Condo Association. We object to this proposed variance on a number of grounds. The most important of which is it's barred by the doctrine of res judicata. The prior application went before the environmental court, and the appeal was denied on the grounds that an alternative viable design was in the record and admitted to by the applicant, thereby precluding compliance with the requirements for a variance. The applicant has stated several times this evening that that design involved approximately 80% of the living space being underground. The drawings that were presented during the prior proceeding showed approximately 20% of one floor and 30% of another floor being underground. So we would dispute the fact that the alternative design requires 80% of the building to be underground. And we feel that there is already an existing court finding to the effect that there is a viable alternative for the applicant that could be used with this lot. This decision was issued in docket number 23 ENV-00068, Trombley Hyde variance denial. Even if it wasn't expressly found that an alternative design was possible, this application would be should be denied on the grounds of issue preclusion, because this issue could have been brought with respect to the prior application. The applicant sought a variance of the 35-foot height requirement or restriction. An alternative argument that was available to them at the time of that appeal was this very argument that they are entitled to a variance with respect to the methodology and how the building is measured, whether it be the 60 feet allowance that the applicant is looking for here. That's what this variance would allow, a building of up to 60 feet tall. And such a building would be completely inconsistent with the neighborhood. It would go against the very reason the city adopted the 35-foot limitation in response to the development on Cambrian Rise. And it would set the stage for a large building that would significantly block views of several residents in the neighborhood and be out of line with the other development in the area. And so for all those reasons, we think the city should deny this application.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Do you have a comment that you would like to make as well?
Sure.
It would be helpful actually if you came up here, just because this is where our recording is.
Yeah, if you want to give them table, just for a minute, you want to step in on.
Sure.
Yeah, so just to piggyback a little bit on what Hans just said, with the context here, the city planners noted that 60-foot height building at Cambrian Rise is highly visible from the lake. They decided that they did not want 60-foot high buildings on Depot Street. Therefore, the city planners developed a new ordinance to split Depot Street off into a separate zone from Cambrian Rise, and they imposed a 35-foot height limit for buildings on Depot Street. That ordinance was approved by City Council in November of 2020. This ordinance was already in effect when Mr. Trombley purchased his lot. If this variance is granted, it would open the door for Mr. Trombley to propose a building that is at least 60 feet above Depot Street. The other thing that I would like to point out here is that in the findings that were presented by the city regarding this application on page 3, it says the subject property is located in a residential neighborhood. The requested variance would enable construction of a residence under separate application. Use of the requested height measurement methodology would minimize disturbance to the slope and any potential impacts on neighboring properties. We are neighboring this property on the east side. He has actually included in his packet a house plan design that is not part of his application here. We feel that if this variance is granted, he can submit whatever plan he wants under this variance and go as high as he wants. The hypothetical plan that he's included, which is not technically part of this approval, is 14 feet above the level grade at which we sit. So yes, it would be visible from North Avenue. It is also 5 feet higher than the plan that he presented that was denied originally with the variance. So these are all things to give you context. I'm not a lawyer, I don't speak legal, but these are all things that we feel are important to our position here. As Mr. Hussey said, he did in fact show everyone that he could comply with the 35-foot height restriction. So we don't think anything's changed. And we're wondering why you might think it has.
Anything else that you want to add?
I think I'm done.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Did you want to speak on this as well?
I think so. I think there's just, there are considerations that I just.
Sorry,
Oh.
who you are and.
My name is Stephen Russo. I'm at 33 North Avenue, apartment 3. There are some things that I don't actually understand about the nature of the decision that you're trying to make. The drawn example that Mr. Trombley submitted to explain the method, how he would use this methodology, shows a building that has been constructed about 35 feet, 34 feet. Its base of its first floor is 34 feet in the air. It then goes up 35 feet from that point. But there is also an elevator shaft, a garage that are also constructed on this hill, making the total height of the building, as he depicts it, 62 feet, I believe. And I don't understand why that is not figuring into any discussion about what is the height of this building, because it appears to me that it would just kind of say, well, I'll just raise the building up 30 feet and that's somehow solving everybody's problem. But there's a whole building underneath it that's got an elevator in it and a garage. It also seems to us that the application for this variance would be so open-ended that, and I refer you to the drawing that was submitted with it. It shows a box that starts it's at halfway up the hill because that's the average of the slope, and suggests that anywhere within that box is okay to design a house. But what we are thinking is that you could go halfway up that hill and step further back and then actually get higher than 35 feet. So we find the request for the variance to be vague in the absence of any real plan. And I understand that the plan that he submitted is not a real plan. It looks like exactly very similar to what he had submitted before, but so we also think that there's a kind of powerful procedural issue going on here, really, which is that Mr. Trombley is asking for a variance without suggesting or telling anybody what he actually intends to do. But once he has that variance in hand, we don't see where he's prohibited from digging into the hill if he wants to, and then starting at 35 feet and going to 70 and saying, well, I have now got this permission to measure from this point. But now I think what I'll do is, and he has in fact, Mr. Trombley also has I believe, a second plan pending for your approval. And it actually is for a duplex that is measured from the street. And it's considerably larger, but he is making the argument in that application, which I don't believe you acted on yet, that because it's a duplex, he can build to a height of 55 feet from the street. So it seems to us that the whole thing is maybe a bit premature for you to make a decision on this height request for a variance in height without knowing at all what Mr. Trombley intends to build and whether he will be 14 feet in the view of our apartments or higher. We don't know that. So we would sort of prefer that the DRB request a plan at the very least so that you can evaluate the consequences of making a decision in his favor. So, thank you.
Is there anyone online that wishes to add a comment as well before we have the applicant respond if they so wish? Anyone else here?
No one else online has
Is there anything that you'd like to respond to from what you heard?
Sure thing. So where to begin? Well, let's start with their initial, the plan that I submitted that was kind of a halfway measure between what you could currently build and what would be possible with this variance is not possible with you would still need the variance to build this property that we're talking, the design that they were talking about that was 20% versus 80% in the ground would still require this variance or some variation of this variance. As far as this being an open-ended request, it actually matches what was in place when I purchased the property. At that time, I had met with Scott and what I was proposing, which is pretty close to the sketch that I provided, would work with the ordinance as it existed at that point. I did not get the application completed before they changed the ordinance to the new ordinance. And that's how it ended up that I wasn't able to build what was requested at that point. When I requested the variance that was denied on appeal, it was hoping that you folks would be able to use the 60-foot max that was allowed in the waterfront zone at that time. I'm not sure if it still is with the new ordinances or not, but I was doing that because I thought that would be a way to make it fit within the ordinances as they existed rather than looking to do something that was outside of what was allowed by the rules in place at the time. That was what the appeal that was refused was for. So this essentially dials it back to a place where there is a way to accommodate the steep slope and be able to build something above ground. So the design that they're referring to that I provided a sketch for was exploring the possibilities between what you can do with the ordinances as they are and the original allowances, if you would. So that design also would not work without the variance. So that's just a misunderstanding on their part. It's not something that's possible right now. So.
What about their comments that there's a duplex application?
No, that was something that Scott and I had looked at because for a period of time it was zoned to allow that. So this was a way for me to get as close as possible to what I had originally intended to do. So it's actually should have been closed out because it's not something that we're still pursuing. We actually replaced that with the current request, if you would.
There was some reference in some materials that you could not reasonably construct another building on this site because of cost, and then maybe a suggestion that you would need to do additional work outside your lot.
That was,
feasible? Is that
well, what that entails is trying to accommodate the 50-foot setback. It would mean that I would have to excavate into the hill almost all the way back to our rear setback limit.
but you don't have to do that any longer if you have a 10-foot.
If we approve this variance, that's a way for me to still build the house without having to do something to that extreme.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is, assume we don't approve this variance.
Right.
You've already got a 10-foot setback, that 10-foot variance.
Well, that 10-foot variance allows me to build the house into the hill. It doesn't allow me to get one above ground.
But could you build the house into the hill physically without requiring work on other people's property? Is it physically possible to build?
Even with that, we would still need to do some soil stabilization during the construction process.
On other people's property?
Likely, yes.
And is what you're proposing now in any way materially or significantly different from what you were proposing in the earlier variance application?
It is materially different in that it just gives me a range of possibility based on a different way of measuring it as opposed to measuring it off from the front of the building.
Would it allow a greater variance than what you had originally asked for?
No. It would be essentially the same as the original variance trying to use the 60-foot version. That would be the maximum that you'd be able to do based on that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So I can assume that while there's an ordinance about building height, the building depth is not specified in the code, so a basement could go
Subterranean,
quite deep.
deep if you want.
Any other questions from the board?
I had a couple comments and then there's two hands raised, another from Attorney Hussey and then Bill Pearson on the line.
Let's hear from Bill Pearson first, please.
Bill?
Just wanted to check, when AJ did the swearing in before, have you been sworn in or do I need to swear you in?
You need to swear me in. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Do you swear that the testimony you give tonight is true and correct under pains and penalty of perjury?
I do so swear.
Thank you. We welcome any comments that you have at this point, and just can you share as well before you start where you live?
Yes, I live at 33 North Avenue, Unit 1. So my home is in the condo building that's adjacent to Mr. Trombley's property.
Thank you.
My comment is that the variance says Mr. Trombley wants to choose between 5.2.6 between A and B. And Mr. Trombley is saying that B allows him to get an average height around the perimeter of the building. That is not true. If you read 5.2.6B right now, it says that if you use that method, then you measure from the facade of the building, the side of the building that faces the street. There is no provision in the CDO for having a measurement all around the building. And I'm really shocked that the board is considering a request for relief where what's being requested is not offered anywhere in the CDO. That's my comment. The 52.6B does not allow this all around the building measurement. Thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And then Mr. Husey, do you have an additional comment that you would like to add?
Let's get a glass of water. I don't know, I just pressed ask to unmute.
We can't hear you if you are,
Yep, I'm sorry.
okay.
I'd like to follow with respect to the Article 12.1.1D, which speaks to altering the essential character of the neighborhood. I'm not sure how you can make that finding without a plan in front of you. How can you possibly make a finding that changing this alternative mode of measuring the height of the building won't impact the essential nature of the neighborhood without any plan before you? Because once you grant this variance, it's a done deal and you can't go back and consider its impact on the neighborhood. So if you do this, you're essentially waiving subpart D in its entirety, and the board will never have an opportunity to address that aspect of the variance request. And I don't think it's appropriate that you consider this request in the abstract and without a plan before the board. And I'd also just like to read from the decision in the environmental court. In that order, the court said, based on Mr. Trombley's own testimony and the exhibits he provided, as well as the stipulated exhibits of other parties, it is undisputed that there is a possible building design which would comply with the CDO's height limitations, or would at least be more compliant. In other words, the evidence at trial demonstrated it is possible to develop the property in conformity with the city's height regulations, and that the variance requested to construct a house of up to 60 feet tall is not the minimum variance that will afford relief and the least deviation from the CDO. So we have a prior decision by the environmental court expressly finding that this property can be developed in compliance with the CDO, which would preclude the issuance of a variance.
Thank you. I have a question for staff based on this. I'm just looking at 5.2.6 A, B, the finished grade within a 10-foot horizontal distance.
Yeah.
The use of horizontal in the first part seems different than horizontal in the second part. It's 50-foot horizontal distance. I guess, what's your interpretation of the comment that we heard where the average of the perimeter versus that, the specific language that's in this version B, where it says,
Mr. Pearson?
yeah, the average finished grade within a 10-foot horizontal distance of the building street facing facade.
Where the proposed building is more than 50 feet, 50 foot.
Right, which is we're applying that even though it's less than 50 feet, but it's the first part. I can understand where that would not necessarily be read as perimeter.
So on item B, Yeah, they should ensure within 10 foot horizontal distance to buildings. Facing facade where the proposed building is more than 50. We'll get that.
I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's for what I'm saying is that.
It seems like it's more designed for change in grade
Yeah,
parallel to the street versus change in grade away from
I
the
would
street.
need to do that key plan. Section has always been for measuring all the way around. I would want to see if that's a transcription error on my part or an error in the amendment, but the intent of B has always been to measure all the way around versus just the front.
Okay.
If we need to continue the hearing, we need to do that. We should, because this doesn't say exactly how that's been. I think that it's probably an error here somewhere.
Any other questions from the board?
I do have one for Scott also. The garage, why are we not treating the garage as the street facing facade?
What garage?
Well, for the example he's provided as a garage on Depot Street. Why are we not measuring the average? That seems to be actually the street facing facade.
You mean this?
Yeah,
So the street facing facade be all the way up here.
okay.
So the garage would be part of that overall height.
Okay.
The thing,
It isn't,
May or may not be the design we're
Right.
looking at.
I take that. point.
but it does actually, that does include that full height on that front side, all the way from the zero at the garage level. That's the way the perimeter measurements do work.
One final fact question on this, which I understand is not an actual proposal.
Sure.
but why is there an entrance bridge at the top? If you don't have access all the way through to.
I have there is a level area up on the back. So I do have a bit of backyard when I'm up at that level.
I do just want to comment for some of the commenters that it is typical for us to review variance without an application. Because typically they cannot complete an application without knowing what the variance has been granted and at what level. So just so you all are aware. Are there any other questions, comments? Is there anything else you wanted to respond to?
No, unless anyone has questions, I just.
With that, we will determine what we do with it if we continue when we are deliberative. So for now, I will close the hearing.
Okay,
Thank you.
all righty, thanks.
Yep, back. All right, the next item on our agenda is 168 Archibald Street. Proposed change in use from a place of worship to a tavern. I assume you're the applicant,
Yep, Kidder Spader.
Kidder. Is there anyone else here to speak on this application? Or anyone online? Would you raise your right hand? Do you
Oops, sorry.
do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. The this is a proposal to convert a place of worship into a bar and tavern. Seems like an interesting project. Why don't you tell us what
Sure.
it is you want to do? We have
So-
it there.
I purchased the building 2 years ago. It was last used in 2020 as a synagogue. So in the basement, we converted the basement into a 2-unit apartment. And then upstairs, what we're looking to do is create a food hall / bar where we'd have 3 to 5 independent merchants selling food. So it's almost like food truck meets food hall, so a smaller version of a faneuil hall. The food for the vendors would be prepared offsite, so the person I'm working with has a commercial kitchen, so we wouldn't be setting up a commercial kitchen in the building itself. And then we would have pretty much the vendors serving their food, a bar in it, and it would be open for the community to come in. And then upstairs, we would have kind of a art gallery, community center, and then it would also be used for events. So if people want to rent it out for the whole space itself, they could rent it out for the whole space itself.
Okay. Does the board have any questions?
There's talk about a outdoor area. Could you talk about that?
Yep, so part of the property, it's about 25 by 25 feet. It's to the east side of the building on Hyde Street in Archibald. So that would be a space that we'd hope to use for setting up picnic tables. Right now it has a chain link fence. We would probably do a 3-foot fence over time. We aren't applying for that at this point, but because it's on a corner lot, it would have to be a pretty low fence anyways. And set up so people could come, get food, have a drink, their family could join them, friends could join them. So
There's that grassy area, I think.
it's a grassy area.
And then, would the tables and chairs be taken in during the night or left out?
Yet to be determined. My vision is that they'd probably be picnic table style, so maybe 5 or 6, and then some Adirondack chairs sitting around too.
Be concerned about people using those during off hours?
I wouldn't. We'll lock it on both sides right now. It is locked. The tenant that lives downstairs, also, we'd be working with him, so he would make sure it wouldn't be something he'd want either.
And for alcohol, you just card people or?
Yeah.
So it says it's intended to host performances and social events. Could you just tell us what that means?
Yeah, pretty much. There's a small stage that was left over from the synagogue itself. So acoustic music, more or less just people playing surround sound. Yeah.
Social events?
Social events, yeah. Oh, what kind of social events? Birthdays, bar mitzvahs, there could be a wedding ceremony. Yeah.
There's some discussion in your write-up of the outdoor space actually also being used for performances.
Yeah, so same sort of thing where we might have like a performer playing guitar. We restricted that to 3 nights a week, just because it's not our main function.
Looks like it's 4 nights. You're right,
Is it?
Thursday through Sunday.
The conditions of approval, you say, Thursday, Friday, Saturday,
Correct. Yeah,
ending at 10 p.m.
correct. Yeah.
And I'll say that nothing in that would allow you, I mean, the city has general noise standards.
Yeah.
So, what, regardless of the hour. Is there any concern? Did you talk to Public Works at all? Or
A couple of times, yeah.
any concerns from them on traffic or in the area like winter?
Not that we've heard of.
It looks like you have handicapped access.
We have ADA bathrooms that we're putting in. There is a ramp. It doesn't quite meet ADA standards, just because we don't have enough of a run, and the ramp sits on it's common land. So the building is set up as a condo with another legacy portion from the synagogue. And so we share that piece. So it'd be difficult at this point for me to get the full run in.
Are you gonna you're keeping the apartments under the basement?
Yeah.
Are there any issues with fire safety? The fire marshal in there?
We had to address moving the bathrooms, couldn't be downstairs. We had to move them upstairs because the height clearance wasn't 80 inches. Some of the windows, there was a depth that was 5 inches, so we put barriers over the ends of the windows. Just some change of use items that legacy wise as a synagogue, it had gone through, but railings were 42 inches, but the space between was 10 inches. So we put suspension cables in between there.
And you'll have trucks of food pulling up or?
No, there might be one truck on the property. But it's more if you think of going to like a festival or a farmer's market where someone would have a small table, pre-prepared food. So if we did have a truck, it would be located on the property itself.
But to, I guess it's a jump off, but I understand.
Okay.
Sorry, but where on the property would it be located? The truck?
The truck, there's a parking lot to the west side. It's a concrete.
Oh,
Yeah.
the site plan. What was planned, yeah.
Is it off Archibald?
It's off Archibald. Yeah, so it'd be between Rat's Mission and our building.
Is that on your property?
It is on, yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody from the audience online?
What are you saying is that?
All right. Interesting project. We'll deliberate on this tonight and probably vote on this. More questions?
No.
You sure?
Yes.
All right. Close the public hearings.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thanks. The next item on our agenda is 72 Temple Street. This is the Habitat for Humanity after the fact tree approval, tree clearing and replanting. Yeah, your colleagues not gonna show up on Zoom. Okay, tell you about it. So we have had extensive hearings on this and opened at least, I think, we opened the last May 6th hearing. We had a full hearing on it. We heard from many interested parties. The board took it under advisement and we voted to reopen it with the specific direction that the applicant bring forward a revised landscaping plan that includes increasing the caliber of the planted trees to 2.5 to 3 inches for new trees, additional screening to the west and northwest, and the inclusion of the previously proposed arborvitae. The continued hearing will be limited to review of just these revisions. And so tonight, we are limited to a discussion, and I do strenuously mean that, given the depth of the discussion we had last time, of the one, whether or not the applicant has brought forward a plan that has 2.5 and 3 inch caliber hearings, the additional screening to the west and northwest, and the inclusion of the proposed the inclusion of the previously proposed arborvitae. So with that, I will open the hearing and ask everybody who wants to speak on this to raise their right hand. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
All right. So you have the revised plan up. Can you just identify where the 2.5 inch trees are, or you could just say you've added those and the arborvitae, and then walk us through the revised screening to the west and northwest.
All the trees are now between 2.5 and 3 inch caliber. We've added 7 more native deciduous trees and 10 more native white cedar arborvitaes
Okay.
in the locations that you requested.
Okay. Questions from the board? Right. Thank you for bringing that back to us. Let's hear from your neighbors on that.
This one? Oh, that's right.
Hey, wherever you go.
I,
We can hear you. Just identify yourself again for the record.
Barry Deladuke,
Yep.
and the owner of this place.
Okay, my recommendation, if this is still approved or not approved, but a plan is replace this deciduous tree with one more arborvitae.
Okay. Okay, that sounds
More than happy to do that.
great. Thank you for that. Anybody else?
You have Johnson online, AJ.
Okay. Sir, floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me? This is John Suma.
Yes.
Okay, I have a question. I see the proposed cedars along the northwest side of the property. My question is, why are those being put there with only 3 along the east side of the property, which abuts the Rockland Condominium's property? And speaking on behalf of the owners of Condominium Association Rockland, we want to know why there are only 3 proposed arborvitae when that's the main area of tree destruction and the destruction of privacy, as well as the potential for erosion and runoff. Why can't there be more trees on our side? We're getting the least number of trees, but we had the most damage. That's all I had to say.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments? All right, with that, I will close the public hearing. We'll take this under advisement and deliberate.
Thank you.
And that ends our public hearing for the. We'll deliberate on these as they go.